Why did Anakin Skywalker choose to wear Old Republic Jedi armor during the Clone Wars? Greetings my friends, and welcome back to the ever-expanding archives. Anakin's signature armor in the Clone Wars was noticeably different than most other Jedi. It was obviously much darker in coloration, and had various distinct design differences with the other clone trooper-like armor worn by the Jedi. This was because, according to the Ahsoka show from behind the scenes and a conversation between Hayden Christensen and Dave Filoni reveals that Anakin had actually taken this armor out of the Jedi Temple's storage. When talking to Hayden in armor, Dave Filoni said this armor that he would have gotten out of the Jedi Temple. They haven't used it in a very long time because they weren't at war. And also, that's where he gets this stuff. This should feel like it was downstairs, kept in storage, but it's battle scarred and worn. This is extremely compelling because once again Anakin has chosen to defy the normality of what the other Jedi were doing. But just like his darker colored tunics, Anakin always used his clothes to make a wordless but a loud statement to the Council. So today join us as we open up another holocron and delve into why Anakin chose to wear Old Republic Jedi armor. The armor worn by the Jedi generals within the first few years of the Clone Wars had both practical and symbolic meaning. It wasn't against their code to wear armor, and the Jedi had done so for thousands of years when in wartime eras. In this era though, there was a line in the sand between who was loyal to the Republic and who was not. Inadvertently, the clone troopers became the symbol of the Grand Army. They represented security and sovereignty of the Republic and the battlefield as white knights of justice. At the same time, the Jedi decided to acquaint themselves with more of the symbolism of their allegiance to the Republic, donning armor inspired by the clones. The now often sported plastisteel gauntlets were actually pieces of modified clone trooper armor. Obi-Wan most notably wore several pieces of clone armor, creating nearly a full set to associate camaraderie between himself and his clone troopers. In Legends, Obi-Wan was the first to speak out on behalf of the clones' individuality as lives within the Force itself and not simply templates of Jango. And so, Obi-Wan was the first to create a full suit of armor, hoping to integrate himself with his clones as one of them rather than claiming to be above them. During the Battle of Hypori, Obi-Wan even went as far as to wear a modified clone trooper helmet. Thus, this full set was known as the Jedi Commander armor, and it was worn several times by several people, including Jaro Tapal, and even Mace Windu at one point very brief during the war. To make Jedi Commander armor, they essentially took and modified clone armor pieces to fit Jedi so that they would offer protection while not hampering their lightsaber technique. And this was the impression that we had for all of the Jedi, that they just wore different colors of clone commander armor. Heretofore, we had assumed that Anakin's armor was simply a dark color version of this modified armor, and that it had come from a clone. After all, he had chosen to make his Jedi tunics out of dark colors and even leather rather than the tan and brown linens of the other Jedi. Leather, of course, offered slightly more protection than other materials, which signified that Anakin expected to encounter battle often. The dark colors were meant to represent his individuality away from the Jedi and his rebellion. However, when the Clone Wars rolled around, it seemed that Anakin took his rebellion a step further. When other Jedi were fitting themselves with white armor of the clones, Anakin delved deeply into the Jedi storage rooms and extracted pieces of Jedi armor worn in the era of the Old Republic. The reason we're so adamant that this is the Old Republic armor is because of what Dave Filoni said. They haven't used it in a very long time because the Jedi were not at war. We can date the armor by a couple of factors. Firstly, it couldn't have been the High Republic armor because the Jedi in the High Republic didn't wear armor, and even those that might have worn some were white and gold in color, not the dark gray that Anakin has here. But more importantly, both canon and legends share one thing in common. The Jedi haven't been to war for nearly 1,000 years. They eschewed the use of armor in 1000 BBY, when the Sith Order and the Sith Wars was ended. Canon's version of the Old Republic is markedly different than that of Legends, which is a topic that we've discussed before. So obviously Anakin's armor isn't going to resemble what we've seen in the Legends Old Republic. But the two continuities share similarities in that the Jedi and Sith were at war for a very long time during the days leading up into the year 1000 BBY. After this, the Jedi put down their armor and would only wear tunics up until the Clone War. All of this is to say that Anakin's armor is unrecognizable because it is a relic of a past that we have not yet explored. This is canon Old Republic armor, and apparently one that has seen actual battle. As Dave puts it, it should feel like it is downstairs, kept in storage, but it's battle scarred and worn. Anakin decided to wear antiques to the Clone Wars. This is a big deal. Some may be confused by this though. So to this I say, what might you think these armors were for in the first place? what was Anakin's armor's original intention? Jedi wearing armor in the Clone Wars was one thing. Clone armor was designed to fight back against blaster bolts that would be the main threat. Many Jedi generals wore gauntlets, both as a means to protect their forearms when they're holding their lightsabers, but they could also take a glancing blaster bolt to the arm and keep holding their lightsaber for much longer, or they'd be able to crawl and roll around on the ground without having the shrapnel dig into their wrist. Clone armor around the chest area was not immune to blaster bolts, but it was designed to stave off the worst of the shots so that they could be able to receive medical attention. This was the thought process of the Jedi donning the clone armor as well. They knew that they would be going into battle situations where blaster bolts would be the main threat. But this is not the case for the Old Republic armor, nor was it Anakin's thinking. The greatest threat facing the Jedi of the Old Republic was the Sith, lightsaber-wielding enemies. Notice how Anakin's armor is focused on his upper chest, sports a downward sloping design which covers his entire upper body and shoulders. In the case that a saber were to slip his defense and score a glancing blow, he wouldn't go down immediately because the blade got directed downward, away from his face. Not to mention, I imagine Anakin's armor was made much heavier and stronger material than plastisteel worn by the other Jedi. Since his armor was designed to do battle with Sith Lords, it could likely tank at least one shallow lightsaber strike. Anakin went into the Clone Wars with a single thought: encounters with Sith are more likely than they used to be. He knew Qui-Gon was killed by one. The Jedi weren't prepared for other lightsaber-wielding enemies, and Anakin knew it. He wasn't prepared for the sheer skill of Count Dooku early in the war, and more Jedi were falling to the dark side as the war emerged. For the longest time, Anakin had the singular goal of revenge against the Count. So instead of using the blaster-deflecting Xian form, Anakin altered his style to learn Gemso, the duelist variant of Form 5. Combining this with his Old Republic Jedi armor, this reveals Anakin's mindset when he was planning to go into full contact battle with Dooku. But beyond this, Anakin's battle armor would serve him quite well against a myriad of different enemies such as Ventress. So while other Jedi were preparing to dig into the battlefield trenches and to fight droids, Anakin's focus was showing that he had plans on stabbing at the heart of the war, rooting out the Sith behind the scenes. Anakin decided to wear Old Republic Jedi armor rather than clone-style commander armor that Obi-Wan and the rest did. He did this because he knew who the true enemy really was. It was the Sith. And Anakin was far too skilled for any droid or any blaster-wielding enemy. And Anakin never lost sight of the true threat. His every move, a harbinger of revenge against the Count. The man who ironically was his greatest teacher in the Clone Wars, maybe even greater than Obi-Wan. We were super excited to hear Dave Filoni's offhanded comment about Anakin having gotten to wear the armors out of storage. Old Republic. This runs contrary to what we knew about all of the other Jedi armor, and had been fashioned from pieces of the clones. But this actually makes a lot of sense. Anakin's armor is so much different than the other Jedi. It's not just a different color, it's an entirely different style. Just taking the shoulder pieces for example, the clone pauldrons of Obi-Wan wears are cup-shaped and wrap around his shoulders, but Anakin's are flat, and they stick out against his arms. This does have more gaps, but it grants him more range of motion for Gemso. This allows Anakin to raise his arms over his head. The chest plate also looks unsettlingly similar to the chest armor worn by Darth Vader. This is an unfortunate bit of foreshadowing for there as well. But anyway, my friends, what did you think about this? And what did you think of Dave Filoni's comment? How do you feel about Anakin choosing to wear Old Republic Jedi armor? And do you think that this reflects his mindset going into the Clone Wars, especially how it differed from the other Jedi? And in the end, who was correct? Whose armor was superior? That of the Chosen One, or the other Jedi such as Obi-Wan? As always, my friends, thank you so much for visiting the channel and the archives today, and as always, may the Force be with you.